Hi guys, I'm Madeline. I'm a horticulture student here at MSU, and today I'm just going to be doing a little presentation on bud grafting. I'm going to try to cover what grafting is, why we use it, and if you're curious, how to do it and how you can do it pretty cheaply in your own backyard. So, bud grafting is a way that we can get multiple varieties of the same fruit onto one tree, or you can get the right variety on a different rootstock. And here you can see that there's lemons, oranges, and limes all on the same tree, and that is because of grafting. We were able to graft these kinds of fruits onto one rootstock, and they can all survive. So if we can do that, what's stopping us from grafting bananas and pears, apples, avocados? There's a kiwi and an orange on this tree. What's stopping this? Why aren't we seeing this everywhere? That's because these fruits aren't closely related enough, unfortunately, to be able to graft onto a rootstock. The scion and the rootstock need to be closely related enough that they don't genetically repel each other. So we can't do this, but we can accomplish the image on the right, where you can see tons of different flower colors. Each flower color is a different variety of plum. So all of these stone fruits are closely related enough that they were all able to be grafted onto a rootstock and live, which is really important in horticultural fruit production, because you can take a bud from a Macintosh apple or Cosmic Crisp or a Honey Crisp and graft it onto an already pre-existing rootstock, and that plant will produce those apples from that branch. So it's really important in choosing different varieties, and it allows growers to change what varieties they're growing very quickly, which is very important to stay up with market production. So hopefully by the end of today, we're going to know what grafting is, and know some biological components involved in it, as well as explain why it's used in the industry and what it helps us accomplish, and also know a little bit more about grafting techniques and how to do it if you're interested. So, I already went over why we use grafting in the industry, but what actually is grafting? Grafting is taking two different plants and forming a union between them. So there's three parts of a graft: a scion, a rootstock, and a graft union. A scion is the top part of a plant, usually chosen for a flower or a fruit type that you want. And fruit production is always the kind of fruit that you're trying to get, that you can't just grow from seed. The rootstock is the part that we choose based on different environmental conditions. Rootstocks are chosen, and here in Montana it's really important to have cold hardiness, disease resistance. The rootstock helps the plant survive long term in its environment, whereas the scion gives us the fruit that we want from that. And in between the scion and the rootstock is the graft union, which is really important when you're grafting. That's where the wound is, that is where the bud will be placed on the rootstock, and that is where we are most concerned with the healing process. So if you're going to graft, the great thing about grafting is that very few tools are needed in it. You need knives, some tape, your rootstock, and your scion. You might need a little bit of rubbing alcohol to make sure your knives are sterile. That is always a good technique to employ. Grafting knives are a little bit different. You can't really just take a kitchen knife. I'm sure you could, but it'd be harder. You can see here on this image, there are two knives. There's a knife with a flat blade, and there's a knife with a kind of curved and has this weird hump on top. Both of those are used for their own kind of budding. And we use tape to maintain good connection between our scion and our rootstock when they are first introduced to each other, as well as maintain humidity around that wound site, which will help them not dry out and help them heal better also. So the first kind of budding we're going to go over is T-bud grafting, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You make a little T in your rootstock and you slide your bud into that T. So this picture on the far left is the shield to be inserted, which is just a little bit of wood around the bud. The second picture is your rootstock, where you're making a horizontal and vertical incision. You're peeling that bark back and you're sliding the shield right in there and you're wrapping it up to maintain good contact and humidity. There's also a kind of grafting called chip bud grafting. It's very similar to T-bud grafting, except instead of making that T, you just carve that whole portion out. So you cut a notch, you cut down to that notch, you get your scion wood, which is the bud from the plant that you want the fruit from, and you take that scion, that little tiny bud out, and you place it right onto the notch that you created, and you can go ahead and wrap that up. So, the most important thing in any kind of graft is a good connection between the vascular cambium of the rootstock and the scion. What is the vascular cambium? It's really easy to find on wood. So it's right underneath the bark. It's that green stuff that's between the bark and the inner white wood. That's the vascular cambium. That's what we're trying to line up. On the right hand side, you'll see that it is actually pretty far into the anatomy of a tree. You have to go through the outer bark, the inner bark, and the phloem, which is another part of the inner bark, before you actually hit the vascular cambium. So when grafting, you want to maintain good, even pressure, but make sure not to be cutting too deep. Alrighty guys, so I did film a video on how to chip bud and T-bud, and so here is the chip budding video. This is a link to YouTube. I'd love if you just pause the video now, go ahead, check out that YouTube video, watch it, and then we'll move on to the next one. Thank you. Alrighty guys, so if you watched the video on chip budding, we're going to do the exact same thing with this T-budding. I made a YouTube video showing you guys how to do this, walking you through it really slowly and how you can do it at home. Please just go ahead and check that out before moving on. Apples, and this is what they looked like about 3 weeks after the first graft. On the left hand side you'll see the T-bud, and you can still see the scar from the T up and down. All of the weird chunky light green stuff is actually callus, which is undifferentiated cells. It basically forms all of this callus between the rootstock and the scion, which allows the wound to heal over, and the cells will differentiate into whatever the plant needs. So you know that your graft was good if you see a green bud and a lot of good callus. On the right hand side, same thing, you see all of that chunky callus, and you'll see the chip bud on the rootstock. So these are what successful grafts look like, and hopefully you guys will be encouraged to go out and try this yourself. So thank you for listening.